Okay, so very pleased to be here. I'm sorry I don't speak Finnish, so I have to do this in English. I'll see if I can show you something here. I would have liked to give this speech in the Finnish language, but since I cannot speak Finnish, maybe this app can help me.
Olisin halunnut antaa puhe suomen kielellä, mutta koska en voi puhua suomen, ehkä tämä appa auttaa minua.
Was it understandable? But I think it's better to do it in English anyway. So who am I? Well, I'm not a teacher, as many people working in the education sector are. I'm a political scientist, which means I often take a more helicopter view of education rather than looking at what is happening in each and every classroom. I've spent 4 years in the National Agency for Education in Sweden, which is a parallel to your National Board of Education. I worked 8 years in the Ministry of Education and at the OECD in Paris for a couple of years. And I'm still working with organizations like UNESCO, OECD, and European Commission. So that's me. But I would like to start here. It's a job advertisement. It's in Swedish. I apologize for that, but it's a farm, a pig farm, looking for staff. And in the small print it says, experience with piglets and computers is an advantage. And I think this very nicely frames today's discussion. There's not soon enough, it's not a single job where you don't have to deal with computers, the digitalization of our society. So how come we've ended up in this situation then? Well, we'll take a look at 3 megatrends affecting our societies and of course the education system. These are not new trends, that's why they are called megatrends. They've been along for quite a while and you will all recognize them very well. But what we'll try to discuss here today is how are they affecting the educational system. So the first one is globalization. You know, the process where our economies are coming closer and closer together, where we are trading all over the world, and we have what is called hyper competition. It's fierce competition all over the world. We try to make continuous innovations, improvements, to have what is called competitive advantage. All this calls for a lot of flexibility in the workforce, a lot of adaptability in the workforce. This is the process, of course, that makes our computers cheaper and cheaper every year and still better and better every year. And this is why IKEA can sell its furniture at the third of the price today compared with 10 years ago, something. And this also calls in most every country for competence. There's always a cry for more competence. Do we have engineers enough? Do we have computer specialists enough? We have to be part of the world economy and we have to be competitive. But the flexibility and adaptability, I think, is the key here today. And keep that in mind, because this is all I'm going to say at the moment about the globalization. The next big trend is demographics, which can be illustrated like this, perhaps. We're all, as countries, getting older, we're getting healthier and better educated. More people can, some perhaps need, at least a lot of people want to work longer than only to 65 or when we are going to retirement. But since we had the picture before, the slide before, with all the changes going on all the time in the in our work. We have maybe to be much more adaptable again. Maybe we have to change careers. You cannot stay within the same vocation all of your working life. You have to change, perhaps not even work, but perhaps even sector in which you work. So more people will need to change working careers during their working life, which makes, of course, lifelong learning even more important. We've talked about lifelong learning now for 30, 40 years, but now it's really needed. It's a reality. So the education system has to prepare people for change, to be adaptive. If we take a look at the children that started school this autumn, they will retire sometimes approximately 2075. Imagine that time span, 2075. And we have the challenge to equip them with the kind of knowledge, skills, competences they need in a working life up to 2075 or something like that. And I think this quote is a nice way of illustrating the kind of challenges we have. We need to prepare students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that have not been invented yet, in order to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. And that's quite a challenging and complex task, but that is our task. The third megatrend is often illustrated with headlines like this: a lot of jobs disappearing because of technology. So technology, of course, is the third major megatrend. There was a similar report from the Finnish research institute ETLA. I've only seen it like this in Swedish, of course. We had a similar report from Sweden as well. The source of these headlines was a report from two Oxford researchers. They've been looking at the robotization trend, the artificial intelligence trend, and then applying that on the American labor market. And they found out that in 20 years from now, 50% of the American vocations will have been automated. They will be disappearing, taken over by computers and robots. 50% in 20 years. 20 years back, that was 1996. Oops, politicians said in all countries, and made the kind of report, how does this affect our economy? We had one from Sweden, of course, and it said, yes, we are losing jobs at the same pace as the American labor market, about 50% in 20 years. So what is happening? What kind of vocations are disappearing? Well, we've all heard about automatic cars, or automatically driven cars, but I mean, they are not here yet. That's still a little bit of science fiction. But I mean, these kinds of vehicles, working in mines, working in the agriculture sector, we have machines like this in the, no? I'll see if I can start this one.
Bonjour, je m'appelle...
stop it there. But you see, these are kind of systems that are already at sale, already at work. And of course, there's not a single single person working there. They're all automated. Or maybe one that can, deal with a lot of machines at the same time. OECD has looked at what kind of skills that are demanded in today's labor market compared to previous labor markets. And well, what you see here is that going down are, of course, routine manual works. That's, the industry kind of work that you did before that robots can do instead. Routine cognitive work, that's when you use your brain a little bit more. That's, the kind of people working in banks, working in the travel agencies, that kind of people, where we now do the things ourselves with our computers. In online banking, you order your flight tickets on the internet instead of going to a travel agency. And non-routine manual work, well, that's what we saw in the film, in the video clip. It's not a routine kind of work, but it still can be automated and done by computers. Increasing instead is non-routine analytical work and non-routine interpersonal or social kind of activities. And what OECD says is the dilemma of schools is that the skills that are easiest to teach and test are also the skills that are easiest to digitize, to automate, and to outsource. So this means we need a new kind of educational system, more or less. At least teaching new things. Brief look at what kinds of vocations that are most susceptible to change, that will probably change, and those that will perhaps not change as much or disappear as much. Well, we've seen logistics, we talked about that, the service profession we know of, that are much fewer people working in that sector. Administration, as I said, we're doing most of the administration ourselves instead. But there are also things like law, judicial kind of work. There was a young guy, a British guy, he was only 19, but he was very upset that only rich people could apply when they got a parking ticket. Only they could afford a lawyer to apply to see, well, this was not wrong, I shouldn't have my parking ticket. So he made a computer program, put it up free on the internet, and it has now, you can look at that website, it has now helped more than 100,000 people in the United States and in Great Britain. And of course, it's a rule-based system. That's what law is. It's a rule-based system, and when it's rule-based, it can be automated. Journalism, not that routine-based, but still, easy kind of journalism is now roboticized. It's called robot journalism. Of course, they don't look like this, but more or less all of our news agencies have robot systems that do, these easy kind of news flashes. A lot of the sport journalism is automated already. They've done tests in the United States, having computers and journalism writing about a baseball game, and then independent people had to compare the text to see which text is the best. And yeah, what do you think? Of course, the robots made a better referee, or whatever it's called, of the game than the sport journalists did. So this is happening also at a large scale already in our newspapers, and putting journalists out of work. So it's not, as you see, it's not blue-collar work any longer only. It's a lot of white-collar work. It's a lot of middle-class people that risks losing their jobs. So, the kind of vocations that are least susceptible to change is management, education, and care. This is because these kind of skills are still the ones that are most difficult to automize. So originality, creativity, social perceptiveness, manual and finger dexterity, being able to do nice things with your hands. I think you've all heard about telesurgery, that is possible to give surgery on a distance. So there are robots, there are technical possibilities to do very fine things with robots as well, but it's expensive still. I suppose that's why we don't put we have hairdressers still. We don't put our head in a 3D scanner and make a robot cut your hair. I mean, it might look, I've done that, but it's not true yet. So it's a matter of cost yet. But even if it says that education is not as susceptible to change to some other vocation, still there will be the education sector will be affected. Although a lot of work is disappearing, a lot of vocations are disappearing, of course, as always in a time of technological change, new vocations, new jobs are created at the same time. So the same professor that did the first Swedish report also looked at is there creating new jobs in Sweden at the same time? And yes, he could see that we have already had, for 5 years in Sweden, we have already had the speed of change that we are looking for the next 20 years. And the jobs that have gone have been replaced by new jobs. So that's a good news. We have a kind of labor market that is creating new jobs. But the thing is, there is a job polarization. This is an international report looking at what is happening with the robots. It increases productivity, making room for increased wages, new jobs are created, but they say, we caution that the rise of robots is not a blessing for all. We find that low-skilled and middle-skilled workers in particular may lose out. So what we can see and what we see from the Swedish labor market, that's next slide, is that the high-level skills are much more in demand than before, and it's difficult with low-skilled or middle-skilled kind of vocations. I will not go into this one. Instead, these are some figures from the Swedish labor market. This already from 1975 to 2005, and the last years, you see that the high wages part of the jobs are increasing. The middle is not increasing as a lot, and the easiest kind of work is with lowest wages are also increasing a little bit, but not as much as the high wages. And of course, this will put a lot of pressure on the education sector to deal with this, to create young people that can compete with the high skilled jobs and the high wages. That's the part of the robotization we've seen so far. What's coming now, the big discussion in the technological sector at the moment is artificial intelligence. This report came out in October from the White House. I suspect it's one of the latest, and we will not see these kind of reports from the Trump administration, I suppose, but this is still from the Obama administration. Has been looking at what can we use artificial intelligence for in the public sector, how is it used already, and what will it mean in the future. Apparently, the Department of Labor have already started to use what they call digital tutors to train people, unemployed people, non-college educated workers. And they see very good results from it. They get jobs, they get better jobs than if they have a human tutor, and they do it in much less time. So it takes, I think it's 1/3 of the time or something like that, to train someone that with a human tutor takes to the same level, so to speak. So that's one of the things already done today. What the report also says that an artificial intelligence-enabled world demands a data-literate citizenry that is able to read, use, interpret, and communicate about data, and participate in policy debates about matters affected by artificial intelligence. So of course, to be an active citizen, to be able to participate in the public debate, in the policy discussions, we need to know what this is all about. We need to learn about artificial intelligence, all of us. So, a more close look to on the education system then. How will this affect us? Well, OECD have tried to summarize the kind of skills they think are important in the future. It's a mix. It's not only what can be called the good old subject-based skills, to know what and to know how. It's also the kind of skills that we often think of when we're talking about future skills, creativity, critical thinking, ability to make connections, stuff like that. But also behavioral skills, to have self-confidence, to have energy, passion, leadership, and not at least what is called perseverance, duration, what you call sisu. And that's very important because most of the technology goes the other direction. With very short attention spans. We want to have a reply next second, not train the kind of to be able to wait for a long time before we get the answer. Or work hard for it. So that's really needed we need to train that in our young people. I'll show you a little film clip here as well.
Hi, today we're going to show you an exciting new technology that could fundamentally change the way that people will communicate in the future. Imagine being able to virtually teleport from one space to another in real time. Hey Sergio, how does it feel like to be holoported?
It feels great to be holoported.
So if Sergio is to wear his HoloLens device, and I'm going to wear mine, we can see each other in full 3D in real time. We can interact and communicate as if we're co-present. Sergio, can you walk around my space? Can you walk behind this chair? So we're doing everything to give the impression that Sergio and I are present in the same space. Sergio, let's just do a high five. That's
Bye
great.
bye.
Thank you, Sergio. We call this technology holoportation. Now, to make all this happen, we've had to create a new type of 3D capture technology. I'm surrounded by these 3D cameras that we've developed in our team. Each of them is capturing me from a separate viewpoint, and we're fusing this data together to create a temporally consistent model, as you can see reconstructed live behind me. Now, the camera that's filming me has a
We'll stop there. But I mean, of course, this kind of technology is still expensive, but we all know how quickly new expensive technology becomes everyday tools. The VR, virtual reality glasses or headsets are now, for sale for a few hundred euros, and I suspect we'll soon have them also in schools. Maybe to use them like this in this film clip.
Today we use a combination of cadavers and medical illustrations to teach students anatomy. This is a curriculum that hasn't drastically changed in over 100 years because there simply hasn't been another way. The mixed reality of the HoloLens has the potential to revolutionize this education by bringing 3D content into the real world. Now, one of the biggest challenges for students learning anatomy is understanding the body in 3 dimensions and how all the different systems fit together. Using holograms, we can easily separate and focus in on individual systems. For example, we can focus in on the femur, and students can immediately see some of the types of fractures they may one day encounter in the clinic. Now, I can leverage all of these new capabilities while maintaining the important connection with my students. When we're both wearing a HoloLens, I can see what they're looking at, what they're interacting with, I can assess their progress, and they can communicate with me.
So we don't have time to look longer at that film clip, but of course we will see new kinds of learning materials, new kind of textbooks, so to speak, new ways of learning. One thing that is possible when we're working in digital environments is to assess students' knowledge much closer and in a better way, much more formative than we used to with, a summative test at the end, a written test at the end. The technology behind it is called learning analytics. And there's a lot of definitions of what learning analytics is all about, but I think this one is one of the simplest and best. It's about collecting traces that we leave behind when we are working in digital environments. Taking these traces, analyze them, and use them to improve learning. In the same way as the big companies are tracing what we're doing when we are online, when we are buying things, immediately we get commercial advertisers that are much more specialized to my interests than it used to be the case. Of course, the same technology can be used in the learning sector and can be implemented in the different kinds of learning materials that we use. The idea is, of course, to be much more individualized. Not that everyone goes in the same school bus at the same pace to the same place, but a more personalized education. Where we are able to diagnose, to predict what will happen if you don't train this and learn this, and to be prescriptive, this is what you should do. Again, this is not science fiction. It is at work already. There are universities, particularly, of course, in the United States, that do these kinds of things, and they see a much better rate of progress and completion rate for the students than those that are not using these kind of systems. If you're interested in this, we had a European project that ended this summer, but it's still a website where you can read a lot of things regarding learning analytics. One of the main things here is that it gives a lot of feedback to the teacher. I followed a webinar with American virtual schools. And what they realized is that the teachers that are able to understand statistics can give their students much better feedback. So those teachers and those students got better results than teachers that didn't really understand statistics. So they are putting people into statistic courses now. Teachers need to know how to read diagrams, how to understand tables and so on. So visualizing all the data that you are collecting is a very important thing here, to be able to understand what is relevant, what is not relevant, and how should I deal with this information. Of course, you can see that it's possible to have feedback on multiple levels, on the individual level, on class level, school level, where you can compare how different classes are doing, how different teachers are doing perhaps, and so on. So I mean, we are still not here, of course not, but you could foresee a kind of gold mine for educational research, being able to very systematically test different hypotheses. Does this work or does it not work? But that, as I said, is not a technology we have at the moment. Mostly because, not the technology, but more that when you're collecting statistics, you must be very careful about the terminology, so that you are collecting the same things and comparing the same things. And I think that's one of the main sources of difficulties at the moment. What learning analytics tries to do, I think, could be compared with this analogy. Sean Snyder, an American researcher, wrote a paper for OECD a few years ago, and where he distinguished between simple problems, complicated problems, and complex problems. A simple problem, not for me though, but for many people, is to follow a recipe. If you follow a recipe, have the right ingredients, each time you end up with more or less the same kind of food. So it's quite simple. Complicated problem is like shooting a rocket to the moon. It needs a lot of research, it needs a lot of knowledge. You have to be very, of course, knowledgeable. But if you've done it once, it's easier to do the next time. You know the cause and effect, you know what causes what effect, and so on. That's not the case when you have a complex problem, like raising a child. That's, as we all, most of us know anyway, quite complex. If you have had 2 kids before, the 3rd kid might be totally different. It doesn't help very much to read a lot of research, because it's not always possible to use it on this particular kind of young person. And if that is what is, and Sean Snyder meant that our education systems are complex systems rather than complicated systems. But what learning analytics tries to do, I would say, is to reduce complexity. Is to make us understand better cause and effect, to make it complicated still, yes, but not complex perhaps. So, this is a few things that still are challenges for learning analytics. I see time is running, so I shouldn't say more about it. I think it has an enormous potential, but there are serious issues involved still. Privacy, not at least, private integrity, and so on. So I will end by give you a few takeaways, as again they do in the United States. You know, when you leave a restaurant, you can always take away a few things. So these are my takeaways to you. We will see external changes affecting the educational system, which puts demand on adaptivity and flexibility. We probably will see a growing job polarization that may challenge the Nordic social model, where we have relatively egalitarian societies. This in turn will put demands on the education system. Teachers will not be replaced by robots or computers, but certainly their role will change. And one way this is changing the education system is that learning analytics technology will assess new kinds of competencies and in new ways, but it puts a lot of demand on ability to analyze statistics and on privacy issues. So I will end there. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions or comments or protests, perhaps. English or Swedish? Yes, please. There is a microphone coming.
Globalization, and you didn't say a word about the third world. Could you comment on that, please?
Well, it's not called the third world any longer, since one of the reasons is that it's the African economies, the Asian economies are growing very rapidly, and I think they soon will compete in sectors of our economy that we have not expected before. And we've already seen it with the Asian economies, many of them, and I think the same will be true for the African economies. So also in those areas we see the same kind of polarization. Some sectors of society, some parts of some parts of Africa particularly are in the same kind of polarization. Some growing very rapidly, others still not growing at all, becoming even poorer. So, well, the effect we have at the moment is, of course, the migration crisis, as we call it, in Sweden at least. A lot of people want to leave because they get a better job, better life prospects if they come to Europe still. If that would be the case in 10 years, we don't know.
You told that it's big changes are coming. So what are you doing in Sweden? Now you're facing these big challenges and changes.
Yes.
Because what are you planning to make big changes in your school system or teacher education or something like that?
Unfortunately not, no. Too little is happening in Sweden. We are, I think, in many ways far behind Finland. We are far behind many other countries where you work much more, I think, systematically with changes. You have implemented a new curriculum recently, or you are still doing it. We are making small changes now, but not big enough, I think. So this is not a discussion going on among politicians in Sweden, I'm afraid. I've left the Ministry of Education since many years. They don't listen to me.
Okay, it's open up. Thank you very much, Jan, for the very interesting presentation. But I would like to ask one question. You mentioned that the lifelong learning is more important than ever, and you also mentioned that we have a different, OECD has introduced different kind of skills, subject-based skills and behavioral and social skills and skills in thinking and creative integration, and now when we are now moving towards the digital society, so can you estimate what skills are most important?
Well, my answer would be that it's the mix that is important. Yeah. And not, well, of course we will have people that are experts in certain fields, but I think most people will need to have a mix of all these things to be able to compete on the labor market.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Joo, no niin, seuraavana meillä on nyt sitten esiintymässä toimialajohtaja Juha Ketolainen kansainvälisen liikkuvuuden ja yhteistyön keskuksesta Simosta, ja hänen teemana on kansainvälisyys kuuluu kaikille, miten kansainvälistymisen tasa-arvoa voitaisiin edistää. Ole hyvä.